I'm Saffron, a financial analyst who's wrestled numbers to outrun my family's contempt. My mother, Eleanor, a church elder drunk on lineage, and my jittery golden sister, Sophie, turned my miscarriage into their victory chant. At Willowbrook's harvest dinner, their laughter gutted me. Good riddance to a flawed line. I didn't fold. I hunted. Stalking their whispers, I caught Sophie's affair with Daniel, our oily assistant pastor, her pregnancy a cheap fake, all strung up by Eleanor's ruthless grip. With photos I snapped, recordings I snared, and their own venom, I forged my blade. At the Heritage Gala, I swung it, shattered their smug masks for all to see. This is my storm of secrets, vengeance, and the weight I clawed off my soul. Want to watch me shred their gilded lie? Come walk my reckoning. I step into Eleanor's Willowbrook manor, my jacket stiff against the autumn chill seeping through the oaks, and the dread pools in my gut as I brace for the harvest dinner. The air hums with roasted squash and cinnamon, a warmth that never touches me. My mother stands by the hearth, her silk shawl rustling as she adjusts it, her eyes igniting when they fall on Sophie, my sister, who glows beside her, cradling her belly like a prize. Eleanor's voice drips honey as she praises Sophie's motherhood, the future of our line, while I hover near the table, my blouse crisp from years of balancing ledgers, my analyst's life invisible to them. The room swells with their chatter, a cheer that clatters against the oak walls. But I'm the ghost here, my miscarriage 2 years ago, a stain they've never let fade. I see her face then, stone cold after my loss, telling me to bear it quietly, and I've been swallowing their scorn ever since. Sophie's gaze flickers to me, her lips curling into a smirk, as Eleanor grips her arm, a touch too firm, and I catch a falter in her laugh, a snag I tuck away. The chandelier glints, casting shadows, and I settle into my chair, fingers tracing my glass, every laugh tightening my chest. They pass the bread, their voices lilting over silver clinks, and I force a smile, the wine's tang grounding me against the ache. I've built a fortress with numbers, yet here I'm the flaw in their lineage, the one who didn't deliver. Eleanor leans toward Sophie, her voice dropping, and I shift closer, catching her whisper over the shawl's rustle. Legacy is all, her gaze skipping me like I'm nothing. It's not new, this erasure, but tonight it lands harder, twisting in that old wound, and I sip again, steadying myself. Sophie's laugh stumbles under Eleanor's hold, a fleeting crack I might have missed if I weren't so attuned, and it sticks in my mind, a thread I can't name. The meal drags, their talk weaving Sophie's triumph, her baby the golden knot, while my plate sits half-touched, my presence a shadow they ignore. I've known I don't fit their mold, but tonight it's sharper, a ledger I can't square no matter how I tally it. Eleanor's whisper floats again, softer. Legacy is all. And I feel their judgment pressing down, heavier than these stone walls. It's not just neglect, it's a erasure that's been building, and as I watch them, Sophie's smirk lingering, Eleanor's eyes locked on her alone, something shifts in me, a spark I'll tend. This dinner's theirs, but I'm not finished here, not yet. I linger near the pantry as the dinner's clatter fades, the air growing dense with cloves and the faint grease of cooling meat, a heavy veil that settles over me. The others have drifted off, but I stay, drawn by the murmurs seeping through the pantry door, left ajar in their carelessness. Then it hits. Eleanor and Sophie, their voices threading through the gap, their laughter a sharp gust that freezes me in place. Good riddance to a flawed line, Eleanor declares, her words cold as a winter pain, and Sophie's chime follows, a bright, cruel echo that hollows my chest. My throat knots, a surge of heat climbing, but I press it down, my analyst's calm locking it away. They've scratched me out, a tally erased, and the truth stings clearer than ever. 2 years back, when my loss bled me dry, Eleanor's gaze turned hard, her voice a lash. Good riddance to weakness. And I bent under it, but not tonight. A quiet fire stirs in me, threading through my veins, and I know I'll chase their truth, strip away their shine to see what festers beneath. I nudge closer, the floor groaning softly under my step, and spot Sophie's fingers falter as she slips a scrap of paper into her scarf, her eyes darting to the hall with a twitch I can't miss. She doesn't sense me, doesn't guess I'm here, a wisp they've overlooked too long. That falter, that tucked-away note, it's a riddle I'll solve, a frayed edge in her seamless glow. Their voices sink lower, a conspiratorial buzz, and I rest my hand on the wall, its damp coolness steadying me as their words tighten around my ribs. I've been the spare, the bloom that withered, but this isn't mere scorn. It's a toast to my fall, and it wakes something steady in me. Sophie's laugh dies off, Eleanor's glass taps hers, and I ease back, my breath thin, my mind already mapping their next slip. That note she hid. It's my first thread to pull, a hint of what they guard. The manor's walls rise around me, steeped in their past, but I'm not bowed by them anymore. I'm a needle threading through their weave. They see me as nothing, a shade to brush off, but I've tasted their spite now, and it's kindling, not a chain. I glide toward the hall, their mirth a faint ripple at my back, and I know this isn't the end. They've drawn their boundary, but I'll redraw it, step by step, until they face me. Not the flaw, but the one who sees. I ease back to the table, the manor's air tinged with the dinner's fading smoke, a thin haze that prickles my skin as I sink into my chair. The others murmur on, their voices a low drone beneath the rhythm thumping in my ears, but my gaze fixes on Sophie, her grace a brittle veneer across the stretch of linen and glass. She tips her head toward Daniel Hayes, the assistant pastor, his smile slick as dew under the candle's glow, and I catch it, a linger in her eyes, too soft, too tethered, catching on him like a vine on rough bark. From my slant across the table, I see his fingers brush hers beneath the edge, a whisper of contact I'd miss if I weren't counting every breath now. Eleanor looms at the head, her frame taut, and when Daniel's touch idles, her mouth pinches, a flicker she masks with a sip of water, too swift, too practiced. I've heard his pulpit promises before, syrupy vows that echo in my skull, but tonight they clang empty, a tarnished bell against that scrap of paper I saw Sophie hide. Then it cuts through. Eleanor's voice. Daniel, sharp with that edge I've heard before, slicing the chatter, and he jolts, a quiver in his cheek that betrays him, a marionette tugged by her will. My pulse skips, the threads aligning in my mind like figures locking into a sum, and I melt into the table's dimness, letting their ease ripple past me. Sophie's face warms, her grip tightening on her glass, and I ponder the knot between them, the secret pulsing under their gloss. The room hums with their calm, a veil I stand beyond, a wraith mapping the seams they can't hide. Daniel's chuckle swells, overbright, and I log that quiver again, a chink in his polish I'll pry open. I've spent years prying truth from ledgers, cutting through the tangle to the root, and now I turn that blade here, to them. Eleanor's stare darts to Sophie, a silent reigns, and I feel its pressure, the same force that's pinned me, but tonight it's a goad, not a cage. Sophie wilts under it, her sheen fading, and I bank it, the brush, the quiver, the note, each a pebble on a path I'll follow. The meal ebbs, their talk winding down, and I slip to the hall where coats sag with the night's damp. My hand grazes Sophie's scarf, and there it lies, that folded scrap, alive with promise. I open it in the gloom, the script bold against the creases. Post-prayer, old oak, D. My chest flares, a rush threading through me, not dread, but a hunter's thrill. The manor's walls seem to tilt closer, their shadows lapping at my heels, but I rise above them, a flame fed by their oversight. They deem me blind, a scribble in their tale, but I've glimpsed their stumble and I'll trail it, quiet and sure, until their fragile tower splits apart. I thread through Willowbrook's streets in the days that follow, the cobblestones gleaming with morning mist, a pale gloss that steadies the resolve firming in my marrow. The note, post-prayer, old oak, D, simmers in my pocket, a lodestone pulling my steps, and after days of watching her haunts, I shadow Sophie like a falcon tracing its mark. She glides into the tea house on Market Lane, her scarf fluttering like a signal, and there sits Daniel, his wiry form slouched at a corner table, his grin a blade's curve under the lamplight. I pause outside, breath clouding the pain, and watch her hand seize his wrist, firm as a seal, a bond I trap in my lens. My phone buzzes as I snap it, the sound a soft victory, a pebble in my swelling cash. Back at the manor, Eleanor's voice seeps from the parlor, cool and clipped, brushing off a deacon's murmur about Daniel. Sophie's glow drowns out idle tongues. And I hear the falsehood, a warped chime on a frayed cord. I've unraveled tangles in numbers, sifted clarity from murk, and now I bend that skill to them, my gaze sharpening on every join. Sophie drifts through the house, her laughter a thin peel, and I wait, a wraith in their corridors, until dusk drapes its shadow over the sky. The neighbor's words linger as I pass her gate. Her belly sprang up like a conjurer's trick. And doubt twists tighter, a coil ready to spring. I bide until the manor stills, the last light snuffed, then slip to Sophie's room and test the knob, finding it free in her rush. Her bag slumps by the bed, a reckless heap, and I probe through it, my fingers grazing silk and paper until they clasp a receipt, freshly crumpled, dated yesterday, vitamins, not prenatal care, a veil for her sham. My pulse surges, a flood cresting, and I tuck it away, the heft of evidence anchoring my grip. The room hums with her lavender, a stifling mist that pricks my throat, but I hold steady, the fragments clicking into place, Sophie's glow a counterfeit, Daniel's touch her crutch, and Eleanor's words a bulwark for their ruse. I've always been the one they shoved aside, the ledger's void slot, but now I clutch their reckoning, and it's skewed beyond measure. The manor's beams groan around me, a murmur of ancient joints, and I retreat, the receipt a coal smoldering in my thoughts. Their voices from that dinner, their laughter, flare in stark outline, and I grasp it now, not just disdain, but a plot I'll unbuild, beam by beam. Sophie's scarf dangles on the rack as I pass, that note's whisper urging me on, and I know I'm near, the tang of their deceit thick in the stillness. The town dozes beyond these walls, its lanterns glinting through the haze, but I'm alert, a weaver of their labyrinth, my tread hushed as I stack my proof. They mark me a shade, a zero in their count, but I've seized their flaw, and I'll tilt their frame until it breaks. I grip the receipt like a relic, its folds a chart of Sophie's deceit, and the manor's hush buzzes around me, a taut stillness that fuels the tempest swirling in my blood. The vitamins, not prenatal care, weigh in my pocket, a foundation stone, but I crave more, so I linger near her door, where voices curl upward like tendrils from below. Sophie's laughter trickles out, a brittle chime, and I edge closer, my phone ready as she chats with Daniel, her words a reckless cascade. Eleanor's so proud, she'll never doubt me. Her giggle a shard piercing my ribs. I capture it, the sound braiding into my trap, a strand of their guile I'll bind fast. Her rosewater wafts up, a bitter wisp that stings my lungs, but I stand firm, my analyst's mind weaving the design, her false radiance, Daniel's collusion, and Eleanor's deliberate veil. At the table days ago, I saw his glance at Eleanor, a twitchy flinch when she spoke, and now it slots in, a key turning, her will driving this charade. I've been the cast-off sheet, the count they scrubbed, but their venom has forged me, a stylus carved from their quill. The receipt's revelation gnaws, and I comb through echoes, threading the puzzle until a church friend's murmur at the market hooks me. Eleanor pushed Daniel into it, all for legacy. Her tone a shiver I cup like frost. I'd ignored such whispers at the table, but now my chest clamps, a forge of wrath and insight, and I see it all, not just Sophie's ruse, but Eleanor's mastery, her hands threading Daniel into Sophie's lie to bolster their polished myth. The manor's walls tower, their wood scarred with their vanity, and I stalk its passages, a wisp tracing their weave. Sophie's scarf sways in the hall, a taunting echo of that note, and I recall her shaky fingers, her flush beneath Eleanor's gaze, clues I mistook for frailty, not craft. The dinner's laughter rewinds, a bitter spool, and I seize their ploy, a heritage perched on dust, me the blemish they sank, not the breach they'd wrought. My breath levels, a current calming to intent, and I pile my trove, the tea-house snapshot, the recording's hum, the receipt's blunt mark, each a plank in my rampart. The town beyond these bricks dreams, its spires dim through the twilight, but I blaze on, a beacon in their mist, my stride a muted pulse as I near the core. Eleanor's words from before, Sophie's glow drowns out tongues, toll empty now, a gong split at its heart, and I savor the twist, her guard a net I'll rend. They've cast me as null, a blur on their parchment, but I wield their draft, and it's torn with flaws. Daniel's flinch, Sophie's chime, they craft a cloth I'll unpick, stitch by stitch, until their sham stands naked. The night thickens, shadows seeping like tar, and I rise higher, my flame fanned by their lapse, poised to melt their tally to cinders. I select the Heritage Gala as my proving ground, Willowbrook's church hall alight with lanterns that drift like cinders in the November twilight, their gleam washing over the crowd's finery and Eleanor's stately command. My evidence throbs in my hands, the tea-house photo, the recording's murmur, the receipt's blunt fact, a trinity of edges I've sharpened for this moment. Sophie steps to the dais, her voice weaving tales of motherhood, a coronet of falsehoods shimmering in her tone, and Eleanor radiates pride, her velvet cloak a mantle of victory draped over their fable. I bide in the press of bodies, my pulse a constant bellows, each inhale fanning the coal I've tended since that pantry scorn. The air thrums with their voices, a fabric of devotion and pomp, but I linger apart, a spark poised to flare. When my moment arrives, I climb the platform, the planks groaning beneath my tread, and face them, my voice a bright chime cutting the silence. This bloodline's rot, and I lay it bare, the photo flashing on the gala's screen, Sophie's giggle spilling from my phone, the receipt's truth exposed to all. Her voice quavers as I speak, a tremor in her weave, and gasps rustle through, a breeze across brittle grass, until her face folds, her shine doused like a flame under rain, while Eleanor's gaze ignites, a kiln fired by my challenge. I meet their eyes, my stance unbroken, and then Daniel staggers up, his sheen fraying, his words a tattered cord. "She made me," confessing that Eleanor bound him with that debt I'd sensed when he flinched at her call, a tether I hadn't fully mapped. My lungs expand, a wave crashing loose, and I watch it spread, their spire of crystal fracturing under truth's press. The hall splinters, murmurs rising to a clamor, and Sophie flees, her cries a broken reed, while Eleanor clutches the table, her dominion wobbling on its split base. I've stripped their gloss, revealed the decay they planted, and the crowd's looks shift, some edged with disdain, others softened by sorrow. My declaration hangs, a final knell. This family's pride is dust. And I descend, the air sharp against my face, a rinse of frost as I leave their tumult in my wake. The lanterns waver, throwing shadows that leap along the walls, and I feel it. The load slipping, a harness loosed from my frame. They forged their heritage atop me, the defect they mocked, but I've ground their rock to silt, and it drifts from their hold now. The night beyond calls, its bite a salve, And I stride into it, my gait sure, my breath a wisp in the gloom. Sophie's lament dwindles, Eleanor's fire dims, and the hall's uproar ebbs, a current receding from a coast I've seized. I've brandished their secrets, not as a murmur, but a cry, and the church, their haven, stands pierced by my will. The stars stab the sky, crisp and vivid, and I pause beneath them, no longer their echo, but a blaze they couldn't quench. I step away from the gala's tumult, the church hall's lanterns dimming to faint sparks as I cross into the night. Its frost a soft prickle on my skin, a cool exhale after the blaze I set loose. The crowd's clamor softens, Sophie's cries melt into the breeze, and Eleanor's rule fades to a dwindling coal, a light I no longer pursue. My boots press into Willowbrook's gravel, each stride a muted song of unbinding, and I feel the chain slip, a link worn thin by their disdain now broken by my choice. The sky unfurls above, a vault of stars twinkling like spilled silver, and I halt beneath it, my frame unburdened, freed from the yoke they fastened tight. Within days, I sit at the notary's table, the room ripe with ink and parchment, and sign away my portion of their trust. The pens glide a last flourish, the sum channeled to a refuge where others might grasp the liberty I've seized. The manor lingers in my thoughts, its beams once a prison, now a shell I've outstripped, its confines dwarfed by the horizon I've claimed. I stand in my loft as dawn brushes the town, its rooftops kissed by a tender flush, and the mirror catches their ghosts, stirring that laughter, a thorn that once pierced, Sophie's unsteady grip, Eleanor's steely watch, but they dissolve, a fabric unpicked by my hand. The glass chills my fingertips, and I smile, not at their fall, but at my ascent, a shoot they couldn't choke. I've cast off their blood, not as a scar, but a husk, and it rests behind me, a vestige of a line that bent me yet couldn't snap me. A week later, the refuge's letter arrives, a note of gratitude I fold close, its lines a gentle ripple of the calm I've shaped, a stillness I've won through flame. The streets below stir, wheels clattering, voices blending, and I weave into them, not a shade beneath their steeple, but a strand in a wider weave. Eleanor's vainglory, Sophie's sheen, they crumble in my mind, cinders lifted by a gust I no longer feel, and I see myself true, not their blemish, but a seam of gold they couldn't tap. The morning rises, its beams lacing through the room, and I turn from the window, my reflection steady in the mirror, whole, a woman unmoored. I've trod their crucible, ground their rock to silt, and stepped forth, not as their murmur, but as saffron, a name I've forged, a life I've hewn. The manors hold, their bloods pull, it ebbs away, a current retreating from a bank I've rooted, and I draw a deep breath, the air bright with promise, a morning that's mine to hold. I've trodden a road shaped by their disdain, turned their burden into flight, and learned this, that blood can tether but never carve our truth, that worth rises from within, like I found at their gala, not from their eyes. My journey, from that shadowed manor to this dawn's hold, murmurs a lesson, we are not our scars, but the fire we kindle through them. Eleanor's throne, Sophie's veil, they showed me to pierce the mask, to claim my light when theirs tried to fade me. What do you say, dear listener? Have you known a weight you cast off, a chain you broke to stand tall? Share a moment you broke free below. Let's thread our stories together. This isn't farewell, just a breath. I'll return with more tales to tell. Until then, tread your path and let your spark blaze bright.